Let's talk about the do's and don'ts of SMS in Zoho CRM. I've got a number of areas I'd like to give you some tips on: the length personalization, a whole bunch of things. Let's go through each of them in short, and we'll talk about what to do and what not to do. With the length of the message, SMS stands for short message service. Ideally, your messages are punchy and concise. They have the right amount of information. They're definitely not meant to be the same content that you'd have in an email. I've seen people do that before, where they literally have close to a 1,000 character SMS. Maybe it works if you're in the US, it's still relatively cheap, but I don't think it's really that optimal. I think what you want to do is capture people's attention, and if there's more information that they need to see, you can include a URL that they can tap on their phone, and they can get the information there. Personalization. What you don't want to do is send out hundreds of identical messages. The reason that's a bad idea is, one, people are going to detect that it's generic and they're not going to feel like it's tailored to them. They're less likely to take action on it. And secondly, the carriers, say AT&T if you're in the US, or Telstra and Optus in Australia, wherever you are, you've got these big mobile phone companies. They don't want people to be spamming in their network. If they detect that you're sending out identical messages to hundreds of people, they're going to actually block your number. It means that the important messages that you need to send may not go through anymore, and you might need to buy a new phone number. What you can do instead is use tight CRM integration to personalize each message. Instead of saying hi, you can say hi first name, and that way, if it's done in a relatively friendly way, then people are going to feel like, assuming that they have a reason to understand how you got their information and you haven't just bought their details off the internet, they're going to feel like they can trust you more because you've got the relevant information. Next up, URLs. When you want to include a URL, you should use a URL shortener, because if you use a really long URL, what I've seen is that the carriers will filter them. It may be something related to spammers using long URLs a lot, but if you use a shortener, that tends to not get blocked. And it also has the added advantage that if you do it correctly, you can actually track the open rate of your SMS. You've probably seen stats saying that 90% of SMS get opened compared to only 20% of emails. The way that they figure that out is by having a URL, a specific URL for every person within the SMS. And then when the SMS arrives on the phone, if the person opens that conversation, on modern phones, it will automatically show a URL preview just below where the message was. And when that preview displays, that's actually able to mean that your server can register that they've opened that URL, and you can therefore update their lead record or their contact record in Zoho CRM to indicate that they have opened an SMS. And you can gauge the success of campaigns based on that. You can also, I've put reply rates here, but I meant click-through rates, that you can easily track how many people have clicked on the URL and which person did click on it. Timing. I have sometimes, because I deal with US-based customers, I've sometimes had SMSs and calls at 3 a.m. and that kind of sucks. I don't want to get woken up then. It's much better if you can send it within their normal working or social hours, which I'd define as being 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in their time zone. How do you know what their time zone is? The extension or the integration that you use should have a way of checking the area code of the phone number and being able to tell the time zone based on that. That way you never get in trouble for sending a message at the wrong time. Instead, you can set it up so that it will schedule it in their time zone. You could schedule it at 9:30 a.m. in their time zone, for example. And that way they're more likely to open it and they're less likely to reply stop, because you've annoyed them by sending a message at the wrong time. Spam. That is a problem with SMS. The whole reason why people open SMS more than emails is because there's generally fewer spammers, and the carriers really want to make sure that the SMS networks don't get overloaded with all this junk that people are pushing through. It's one of the reasons that SMS costs money to send, because email is free to send out pretty much, and as a result you get spammers taking advantage of that. You can help keep SMS being a channel that customers will open readily by sending messages that are relevant, personalized, and timely, that are actually adding value, that are helping people to avoid forgetting appointments, letting them know that their parcel has arrived, giving them an update on their order, and sparingly telling them about an amazing promotion or discount that you're running. What you don't want to do is only send out marketing messages, and especially don't do, I'll name names here, there's a company called Kogan in Australia, where if you buy anything from them, they'll then start sending you an SMS almost every day, and it's really annoying. That's the kind of thing that you don't want to do. You want to reserve messages for when it really is important. If you are going to be sending out marketing messages, you probably want to have several phone numbers and rotate between them. Because if carriers detect that you're only sending out marketing messages from one number, then they may end up filtering the messages from that number. If you spread it out, then you're less likely to have problems. You should also avoid sending duplicate messages. The integration that you use should have a way of automatically detecting duplicates and blocking them. And you should also follow relevant legislation around what can and can't be sent. I'll go into this in more details in another slide, but there are certain messages that you can't send over SMS. In terms of what you can put in an SMS, professional and friendly messages are perfect. Don't harass people. Don't send out rude messages via SMS. If a customer's being rude to you, don't reply back and saying F you or anything like that. That's not cool. I've seen people when they've been trying out my extension where they've uploaded pornography images and sent them as a MMS. That's really quite distasteful. That's the kind of thing that will definitely get you blocked from using my extension and will also potentially get you in legal trouble. Don't pretend to be the police by sending out messages just because you can have a different number to what you normally use. Don't abuse that. And be careful about advertising products via SMS that may be illegal in the country. For example, according to Twilio, even though it is legal to buy and sell marijuana in certain ways in the US, you can't, according to the communications legislation, you can't send out SMS advertising them. And similarly, it's probably not going to be legal to send out information about vaping products in Australia because you're not legally allowed to buy the tobacco inhalants that people use for vaping. So you probably want to contact a lawyer if you've got a product that may be in the grey area of legality. Opting out. People, if they don't want to get more messages from you, if you've annoyed them by sending irrelevant or annoying marketing messages, they're used to replying with stop, and make sure that the system you're using will respect that and automatically opt them out. Sometimes people will reply with something like, stop sending me messages, and then because it's not an exact match, they might not be opted out automatically. You'll need to make sure that when you get replies that you check them, and if someone has written a message where their intent is clear that they don't want to receive anymore, you should opt them out yourself at that point. One thing that you can do to be a bit dodgy is you can use, in some countries, not in the US, but in Australia, you can use alphanumeric sender IDs where it will send out from letters instead of from a phone number, and people can't actually reply to that. If you do that, you need to include a URL to allow them to opt out instead. With budget, SMS can be cheap, especially in the US, but it can also get expensive. One thing that you might not be aware of is that if you include emojis in your messages, it actually doubles the cost. Normally, for example, in the US, you'd pay 0.75 cents per message. and each message is considered to be 153 characters. But if you include an emoji or Chinese characters or anything that's non-standard, then the cost actually doubles. The segment length, instead of being 153 characters, it's around 70. So you need to really be careful and plan out your campaign. Put the planned message, if you're going to be sending out thousands of them, into an SMS budget estimator that will tell you how much you're going to be spending. Finally, with your integration with Zoho CRM, do make sure that it's possible to do templated messages where you can use the fields within the CRM. You'd also want to make sure that you can take action based on what people do with the message, that if they open the message, for example, or if they reply to it, you could do cool things where you'd update the lead score. What you don't want to do is have your CRM and then have another system that you use for sending out SMS blasts and not have them linked at all, because then you won't be able to see the communication that went out, and you also won't easily be able to update the opt-outs. Good luck with your SMS journey. Hope it allows you to better serve your customers.